For generations, the idea of the American middle class wasn't just about an income bracket, it was a promise. It was this bedrock belief that if you just worked hard, if you play by the rules, you could build a decent, secure life for your family. And maybe most importantly, you could watch your kids do even better than you did. But lately, there's this anxiety hanging in the air, isn't there? A question that millions of families are asking themselves. Is that bedrock starting to crack? Is that promise broken? Well, in this video today, we're going to dig past the headlines, past the political noise, and really investigate that question. We're going to look at the hard data to understand the massive forces that are reshaping the American economy and what it all means for the middle class. That is a stark and, let's be honest, a pretty alarming statement. It suggests something fundamental is shifting right under our feet, that the very foundation of our society is eroding. So we're going to use this claim as the starting point for our whole investigation. Is it just hyperbole, or is it a cold, hard reality we really need to face? We're going to look at the evidence behind a statement like this and really explore what it means for all of us. Before we jump in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and check out the links in the description if you're looking for a real estate agent in your market or you need life insurance. My team and I can help you anywhere nationwide. Okay, let's get right into it with what might be one of the most sobering charts you'll see on this topic. What you're looking at here, this isn't just a line on a graph. This is the American dream, measured in data. This chart tracks the odds that a child will grow up to earn more than their parents did. Now look at the left side. For the generation born back in 1940, our grandparents' generation, it was practically a sure thing. Over 90% of them out-earned their parents. It was just the normal expectation of life in America. But then look at that steep, steady drop. For every generation that followed, that certainty just nokes away. By the time you get to kids born in 1980, the odds of doing better than your parents had fallen to a coin flip, just 50-50. This is a statistical collapse of upward mobility, and it really sets the stage for everything else we're about to talk about. So to really get our arms around this, we've broken our investigation down into 6 key parts. First, we're going to define what we even mean by the vanishing middle class, turning that feeling into a data pattern. Then we'll dig deeper into that broken promise of mobility we just saw. Third, we'll look at what's called the Great Squeeze, which is all about how the cost of living is crushing family budgets. Then we'll get into the big stuff, unpacking the structural causes of how we got here. We'll also look ahead and ask if AI is about to make this inequality even worse. And we'll finish up by looking at how people are starting to fight back with a resurgence of the worker's voice. This will take us from the problem to the causes to the response. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the vanishing middle class. So many people have this feeling that they're running faster and faster on a hamster wheel, just to stay in the same place. It's a sense that the goalposts for a secure life just keep getting moved further and further away. So the whole point of this first section is to put some hard numbers to that feeling, to see if it's a real measurable pattern in our economy. Okay, so the core idea we need to understand is called the middle class squeeze. And this isn't just a vague feeling that stuff is more expensive. It's a very specific economic thing that happens when 2 pressures hit at the same time. On one side, your wages, they're just not growing very fast. They're stagnating. On the other side, the cost of everything you need for non-negotiables is going up and up. The result? A decline in what's called real wages. Your paycheck might have a bigger number on it, but what that money can actually buy you is shrinking. And that squeeze, it's a direct assault on the promise of a middle-class life. And here's where things get really interesting, a little bit weird even, because if you look at the big headline economic numbers like GDP, the economy often looks like it's doing great, it's growing. But that one big number can hide what's really happening on the ground. See, GDP tells us the total size of the economic pie, but it tells us absolutely nothing about how that pie is being sliced up. And for millions of families, their day-to-day reality just doesn't match the national stats. Life feels tougher, more stressful. This gap between the big picture data and the reality for individual families, that's a huge red flag that the benefits of all of that growth are not being shared widely. So the bottom line here is that this feeling of being squeezed, it's not just in your head, it is backed up by some really clear long-term data. First, and this one is absolutely crucial, the old link between how much a worker produces and how much they get paid, that link is broken. For decades, when the economy got more efficient, workers got a piece of the action. Not anymore. Second, the cost of the absolute pillars of the middle class life, a home, healthcare, a good education, those costs have been rising way, way faster than incomes. And third, what happens when you combine those two things? Well, wealth, the stuff you own, not just what you earn, it gets sucked up to the very, very top. leaving the middle with a smaller and smaller share of the pie. Now, let's move on to our second section, which builds directly on that idea. We're talking about the broken promise of mobility. This takes us right back to that shocking chart we saw at the beginning. The whole American idea is built on this belief that where you start in life shouldn't dictate where you end up. But the data is starting to suggest that the rungs on that ladder of opportunity are getting spaced further and further apart. And for a lot of people, it's starting to look less like a ladder and more like a wall. Now, economists have a pretty academic sounding term for this: intergenerational economic mobility. It sounds complicated, but the idea behind it is actually really simple and really profound. It's just a way of measuring how likely you are to move up or down the economic ladder compared to where your parents were. So, in a country with high mobility, your parents' income doesn't really matter much for your future. It's all about your talent and hard work. But in a country with low mobility, your parents' income is a very strong predictor of your own. So, when we ask if the American dream is hating, what we're really asking is what's happening to our weight of mobility. And this chart gives us a brilliant visual answer. It maps the connection between where a parent is on the income ladder and where their child eventually ends up. Now, just focus on those two gray lines for a second. The steep diagonal one labeled no mobility, that's a world where every kid ends up in the exact same spot as their parents. A caste system, basically. The flat horizontal line, perfect mobility, that's a world where your parents' income has zero impact on your future. Now look at the black line in the middle. That's the average for all Americans. It shows we still have some mobility, sure, but it also shows a real stickiness at the top and the bottom. Where you start matters a lot. But here's where the story gets even more complicated and honestly, a lot more troubling. What happens when we break that average down? The story of mobility is not the same for everybody. This chart shows the stark reality that a child's odds are profoundly shaped by their race. And the most critical thing to understand here is that this data is controlled for starting income. So the different colored lines show that Black and American Indian children have much lower rates of moving up than white and Asian children, even when they start from the exact same low on the ladder as their parents. This isn't about different starting points. It's about different journeys from the same starting point. It suggests that there are deep structural barriers still in place, and that ladder of opportunity has missing rungs for some groups. So why? Why has that promise of upward mobility gotten so much weaker since the 1940s? Well, the research points to two big drivers that are working together. First, after about 1970, the overall US economy just started growing more slowly. The whole pie wasn't getting bigger as fast as it used to. But the second part is even more important. The growth that did happen wasn't shared evenly. The slowdown in income growth was way worse for families in the lower and middle parts of the income ladder. So not only was the pie going slower, but the slices going to the middle class were getting smaller and smaller compared to the slice going to the top. And this brings us right to the heart of the matter for so many families. Section 3, the Great Squeeze. Okay, so we've established that incomes for the middle class are basically flatlining, but that's only one half of the equation. Now we have to look at the other side of the budget: expenses. This is about how the cost of building a basic, secure life has completely changed, turning what used to be manageable costs into crushing survival-level burdens. You can almost think of these as the four horsemen of the middle-class budget apocalypse. For generations, these four things were the absolute cornerstones of the middle-class life: a stable home, affordable care for your kids, being able to see a doctor when you're sick, and the chance to get a college education. But over the last few decades, the cost for every single one of these has just exploded, growing way faster than our paychecks. They've gone from being normal budget items to being these massive sources of debt and stress, forcing families to make totally impossible choices. And in case you're thinking, well, this must be a uniquely American problem, think again. This statistic from the OECD, which tracks developed economies, is absolutely staggering. Across the world's most advanced countries, 1 out of every 2 middle-income families reports having a hard time making ends meet. 50%. This is not an isolated issue. It is a systemic challenge that's hitting modern economies everywhere. A middle-class squeeze is a global phenomenon, and that tells you its causes are deep and structural. And as we prepare to look at those causes, just a quick reminder for you. Before we jump in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and check out the links in the description if you're looking for a real estate agent in your markets or you need life insurance. My team and I can help you anywhere nationwide. So the billion-dollar question: how did we get here? That's what we're tackling in section 4, unpacking the structural causes. Because the trends we've been talking about, the flat wages, the disappearing mobility, the insane costs, they didn't just happen by accident. They're a result of decades of policy decisions, shifting ideas about how the economy should work, and big structural changes. So now we're going to dig into some of the major forces that have completely reshaped the economic landscape for the middle class. At the very heart of this debate for the last 40 years, you've got this huge clash between two completely opposite economic philosophies. On one side, you've got trickle down economics. The basic idea there is that if you cut taxes on the rich and on corporations and get rid of regulations, they'll invest that money, create jobs, and the prosperity will eventually trickle down to everybody else. But on the other side, you've got what's called middle out economics. This theory argues the exact opposite. But a strong, thriving middle class isn't the result of growth, it's the cause of it. The idea is that when regular families have money in their pockets to spend, that's what drives a healthy economy. These two competing ideas have shaped almost every major economic policy decision for decades. And this quote right here, it really hits the nail on the head. It gets to the core of why that first theory is being so heavily questioned now. It points to something we mentioned earlier, wage productivity decoupling. See, for a long, long time, as American workers got more productive, creating more value every hour they worked, their pay went up right alongside it. It was a deal. But that deal has been broken. Productivity has kept going up thanks to new technology, but the money from those gains has mostly gone to corporate profits and shareholders, not to the average worker's paycheck. This proves that just making the whole economic pie bigger doesn't automatically mean a better life for the middle class. The real question is how you slice it up. And here's another huge structural change that I think a lot of people feel deep down. The advice for generations was simple: get a better education, get more skills, and you'll secure your spot in the middle class. And people did it. 20 years ago, only about a third of middle income workers were in jobs considered high skilled. Today, it's 50%. But here's the kicker: even though it now takes more education and more skill just to get into the middle class, those same high skill jobs are not providing the security they used to. This just erodes that fundamental belief that if you invest in yourself, you're guaranteed a stable future. And this brings us to the near future and to our fifth section: AI as an inequality accelerant. Look, there's a ton of talk about how AI is going to change everything, disrupt jobs, remake the economy. But I think the most important way to think about it is this: the biggest threat isn't the machine itself. The threat is how that powerful technology gets used inside the economic system we already have, a system that's already under a lot of pressure. And I want to be really clear about this point. AI did not create the middle class squeeze. It didn't break the link between wages and productivity. But it has the potential to be like pouring gasoline on an already burning fire. It is an accelerant. This technology can create unbelievable amounts of new wealth and productivity. But if we stay on the same path we're on now, all the trends tell us those gains are just going to flow upward, concentrating even more wealth at the top and making all the problems you've talked about even worse. So this poses a really fundamental question for all of us, a question we have to be asking ourselves right now as this revolution is happening. What is the logical, predictable result when you take a technology as powerful as AI and drop it into an economic system that's already deeply unequal? The logical answer is this: powerful technology doesn't magically fix our underlying problems. It just amplifies the system it's put into. If you're the system that's already designed to reward capital more than labor, to concentrate wealth at the top, then a tool that creates massive productivity will, by default, just magnify that inequality. The challenge isn't to stop the technology. The challenge is to change the system so that the benefits of that technology get shared by everyone. Now, all of these pressures, the flat wages, the insane costs, the anxiety about AI, they're not going unanswered. And that brings us to our final section: the resurgence of worker voice. Here, we're going to look at how American workers are starting to organize in new ways to demand a bigger say and a fair share of the economy that they help build every single day. This chart right here, this puts a number on that widespread feeling of powerlessness at work. Researchers call it the voice gap. It's the difference between how much say workers feel like they have and how much say they feel like they should have. And as you can see, that gap is huge. A big majority of workers want more say on everything, from their benefits and job security to how new tech like AI gets used at their job. This gap is what a giant untapped source of energy, and it's what's driving this new wave of organizing. And this demand for a voice, it's not just a feeling anymore. It's turning into real world action. We're seeing a level of labor activity that we haven't seen in this country for decades. We're talking about historic union wins that companies people thought were untouchable, like the Amazon warehouse in Staten Island. We're talking about a grassroots union movement at Starbucks, spreading from one coffee shop to the next. We're seeing major strikes, like Striketober, where some with 100,000 workers walk off the job. And it's not just the old school unions. We're also seeing all these new advocacy groups popping up to fight for workers. And so this leaves us with one final massive question for the future. We've looked at the data showing the decline of the middle class, we've dug into the structural causes, and we've seen how workers are starting to push back. So, as our economy keeps changing at this incredible speed, could this renewed push for a stronger worker voice, could that be the key to rebalancing the scales? Is this the way we actually rebuild a broad, prosperous, and secure American middle class for the 21st century? The answer to that question is going to define the American economy for a long, long time. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Before we go, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and check out the links in the description if you're looking for a real estate agent in your market or you need life insurance. My team and I can help you anywhere nationwide.